Welcome to another episode of the SheBreathes Soul Stories podcast. I am your host, Jen Gulbrand. As everyone knows, the SheBreathes Soul Stories book and podcast is an empowerment movement. Together, we really explore what happens when we own our true stories. And we talk a lot about kind of life's defining moments, but both the light and the dark of those moments and how they shape us, but how they don't have to define us. So I am delighted today to be in the virtual studio with an extraordinary woman. I'm so honored, first of all, to introduce her, the one and only Hilary Harley of Harley Holistic Healing. Good morning, my beautiful friend.
Oh, thank you, Jen, and thank you for your lovely words and introduction. And just so delighted to be here.
It's so fun. So, well, I don't want to spoil Hillary's sort of story and the work that she does, but I'll just preface it by saying she is a phenomenal astrologist and holistic healer. And I just attended one of her workshops, I guess about 3 weeks ago, all
Hmm.
about what's happening in the planets right now, which is
Hmm.
just incredibly significant. So maybe we'll start there a little bit and just have you kind of share a bit about the work that you do and why this time right now is so important.
So this is, the word unprecedented is really overused. So I'll choose the word uncharted. We are
Mm.
in uncharted waters as human beings on this planet right now. We are in a developmental leap. So, you think about a child if they were like 2 years old and they're trying to master a new task. That's where we are individually and collectively. We are going from Homo sapien to Homo luminous, which means
Ah,
from mind centered to heart centered.
right.
And there is this massive shift happening. So, the only really significant equivalent to it in human history is going from Neanderthal to Cro-Magnon.
Wow.
And, no one alive has ever experienced anything like this. We don't know how to navigate it. We don't have the tools. And so it's incumbent on us to be very patient with ourselves
Mm.
and with each other, and to be very open minded, open hearted, open spirited,
Oh yeah.
because we're all on a soul journey together.
It's
And
the
Earth is
collective, yes.
the collective, and Earth is a school, and we're here to
Yeah.
learn lessons. And so it's, we're learning individual lessons, and obviously we're interacting with each other as other people in our lives are learning their lessons. And those have repercussions on, it's like waves that are engaging each other, ripples.
Absolutely. And I mean, anyone who is in this space who is sensitive in any way has been feeling this for
Hmm.
weeks. Talk a
Hmm.
little bit about what's happening with all the planets right now, because it's like all aflutter.
Yes, it is. So I've been practicing for 20 plus years. I started in the late 90s to really learn the trade of astrology, and I have never seen anything like this, where all the interior planets, meaning the sun is in the center, and
Mm.
Mars, Mercury, Venus are the closest to the sun, along with the Earth. And Mars, Mercury, and Venus are retrograde back to back to back. And so it's
Crazy.
this major reset right now. So Mars and Mercury were retrograde together in December. Mars is our energy. It's like our gas pedal, the kick in the pants that gets us out of bed in the morning. And so that has been retrograde since the beginning of December all the way through February 23rd. And
Wow.
Mercury was retrograde overlapping that. It's a shorter time span, but that was retrograde as well in December. And then no sooner does Mars go direct motion than Venus, which is about love, money, and relationships, goes
Mm.
retrograde exactly during Lent, the 40 days and 40 nights of Lent from March 1st through April 12th. And
Crazy.
Mercury again goes retrograde during a portion of that, and we have double eclipses on March 14th and March 29th. So it's
So buckle up, everybody.
it is a very challenging time. And you
Yeah.
don't want to look for trouble,
Right.
but if something is happening energetically and you feel off or wonky or situations come out of the blue, in your life or people peripherally to you, just know that take a breath, take a pause.
Mhm.
This too shall pass. You'll work through it. And then the outer planets on top of that, all five, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, are all changing signs this year.
At the
And
same time, right? Yeah.
well, within 8 months. And
Right.
that's, in the span of cosmic timing, that's basically at the same
S-
time.
That's
Yes.
super huge.
It is super huge because
Yeah.
it's like gear shifts, we're going from first gear to fifth gear, and it just the quality of what we're feeling shifts and changes. And so as above, so below,
Mm.
and as without, so within is
Right.
the phrase. And we feel these shifts continuously. So just again,
Mm.
know that it's not just you. You're not going crazy. There's nothing wrong. It's just being
It just is. Yeah.
it just is. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that you had advised our group was that it's a really good time for the R words, like to rest and retreat and restore and reevaluate, which I think is, harder than it sounds for some of us to do, particularly at the beginning of a new year. But I've
Right.
been practicing it per your advice, and it's really helps to sort of settle the chaos that we're all
Right.
feeling, which is there's so much of that right now.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really about expectation management.
right,
And, to your point, around Christmas and then around
right,
the new year, we're raring to go. We want to, tackle the next thing on the list and the agenda. And Mars is our motivation. I call it motivating Mars. And
sure,
when it's retrograde, it's, not that any planet is comfortable being, in reverse gear, but Mars is about forward thrust
mm,
and drive. And, it rules the energy, it rules
yeah,
the physical body. So when it's retrograde, it's particularly challenging. But you think about the timing during winter, which is a time of
right,
going inward, cozy, and it's in the sign of Cancer, the crab, which is home,
right,
family, food, nurturing, nourishing. So it's really about snuggling up
yeah,
and all those delicious things that in our modern world we're so
resisting,
externally focused
right.
that we don't want to snuggle. We want to get going.
Right. Especially this time of year. Well, that's amazing. Thank you for taking a few moments to kind of share
Of
that because I
course.
think it's a really important time in all of our history on so many levels. So I think it's really helpful for our listeners to have some frame of reference for what they're feeling.
Right.
So let's shift gears a little bit, Hillary. I'd love for you to share a personal story about kind of your transition and transformation into this work that you do and how what led you here.
It's I think a very typical story for a healing arts journey.
Mm,
It began with illness.
mm,
Um, I mean, I'll step back and say my grandmother introduced me to astrology when I was very little, and her husband had passed very young, and so she was looking for some explanation. And so she became very involved in astrology and never practiced it, but she introduced it to me when I was little. And so I was fascinated. And yet, my family, my parents, and the community around me were, I don't want to say not supportive, but they were like, well, we're modern and we
Yeah.
use modern psychology and techniques and
Sure.
medicine and tools. And so I would sneak into bookstores because this was way before Amazon
Oh, yeah.
and buy, astrology books and
Right.
study and find whatever magazines I could on the subject, and then gradually I completely put it away.
Really?
Started a family, and it was in the mid 90s when my children were very little that astrology came in with a force that was irrepressible. And it still, again, the internet was just coming out. It really wasn't full fledged. So I would go over to a bookstore in Cambridge. I lived in Boston at the time, and it's still there. It's called Seven Stars. And
Yes, I
I
know the
bought
bookstore.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
a good old metaphysical bookstore. And I would buy every astrology book I could get my hands on and started, it was sort of like a movie where, it was just, it chooses you, you don't choose it,
Right.
and there's no looking back. And I came to a fork in the road where I could completely suppress this, which was, it felt like a greater risk to suppress it than to pursue it and to see where it led. Um, but it felt so rich and delicious and
Mhm.
yummy every
Yeah.
time I opened a book or drew a chart. I was drawing them by hand because I didn't have the software yet.
Wow.
And so I found teachers in the Boston area. Dietrich Pesson was certainly a formative teacher of mine, and she really taught me the groundwork, the framework for astrology, the technical bits, and uh, opened my practice in 2001. But the illness that came was part of that fork in the road where
Okay.
I was holding a hand up and pushing it away. Oh, this is not mainstream. It's not what, a typical suburban mom would do. I don't look like an astrologer. What does an astrologer even look
I was
like?
gonna say you didn't have a
So
wizard hat.
yeah, it's like, where's my crystal ball and my
Right,
wizard
right.
hat, and my cape, and my black cat? So Um, I was really pushing hard against it in the late
Mm.
90s, even though it was this push me, pull me, because it was like tantalizing and
Right.
fascinating. And it
And it
felt,
lit you up when you
it
did it. Yeah.
completely lit me up. So I developed chronic sinus infections.
Hmm.
And I even went through sinus surgery because I was not going to do anything alternative. I was, diehard allopathic Western medicine.
Yeah.
And the sinus surgery was a complete mistake. It was botched, and there was
Really?
no result, positive outcome. So um, I turned to acupuncture,
Oh yeah.
and the first session, I started to laugh for like, she hit a point called soul door, and I started to laugh for it was uncontrollable for about 10 minutes. And I said, "Is this normal?" And she goes, "People either laugh or they cry when they hit
Right.
that point." So on her shelf on the acupuncturist's bookshelf was a book called Astrology, a Cosmic Science by Isabel Hickey, who's a groundbreaking astrologer and who actually lived in Boston, lived and worked in Boston. And she's long gone now. And I was sort of like,
Ooh,
I borrow that book. And I did. And the doors blew open. So
wow.
even though I had been studying and buying these books and hand drawing my own charts, I was really pushing against it. And the illness, chronic sinus infections for 18 months and this botched surgery really said, it's time to get serious.
It was like really pulling you, compelling you to proceed. Were
Hmm.
you getting, I'm curious, were you getting kind of, I don't want to say shut down, but sort of resistance or pushback from people around you regarding doing this? Like, did it feel like you had to be in hiding because it wasn't mainstream?
Um, so this was 2000, and my husband at the
Okay.
time was very, he wasn't not supportive and he wasn't,
Yeah.
he didn't care one way or the other. It was like, if this lights you up,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
whatever floats your boat. And my children obviously didn't care. My parents were elderly and they lived in another state, so they
Right.
weren't saying anything. And my two sisters really didn't, they were busy with their
Understand.
lives. So it was really an internal, like,
Ah, yeah. Fighting against
pushing
that programming. Yeah.
a
Right.
1000%.
Which we
Yep,
talk so much about, those belief systems that we don't even know where they come from, but they're in our subconscious and kind of questioning yourself and the validity of it. Yeah.
right, right,
Wow, that's
right.
great. And so here you are. You
So here
pushed
I
right through.
am. Yeah, so I came out on the other side of the sinus. You think about it, it's like third eye.
Right.
I mean, sinuses are right in front of the third
Right.
eye,
Yeah.
and so it was being opened literally, and I started to see clients in 2001.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, what is it about that story or that journey that resonates most with you? Like I think for our listeners to know, like, you were able to kind of move through those limiting beliefs that you had for yourself around this stuff and really honor something that you felt inside, right? Like, it's almost like you gave yourself permission to respond to this calling that you were having.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's the message, right? Because
Exactly. It is 100% giving yourself permission. There's a great Anais Nin quotation. The time came when it was greater risk to stay small. I'm
yes.
paraphrasing here. It was a greater risk to stay small than to take the leap of faith and
Right.
and risk.
Right.
And that was exactly what described my journey because if I stayed small and hid this passion and talent, I
And
would use
gift,
this,
I was going to say, and your gifts, right?
you
Yeah.
know, you're essentially dishonoring your
Hmm.
soul contract, you're
Right.
dishonoring spirit
Yep.
and source
Yeah.
because you're put here on this planet to learn the tool, the trade, the craft, and to share it.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to keep it to yourself. It's like a garden that you're sharing or a library that you're sharing with other people.
Right. And I mean, I can imagine doing this work now. I mean, I'm one of many, many clients of yours, but it has to be super, I don't know what the word would be, reaffirming, empowering to know that you took that risk, you took that leap, and just the benefit of being able to do that, not only for people receiving, but for yourself,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
mean, I look back and I think, how could I have been that self-limiting?
Mm-hmm.
And I would still go to like gatherings, in the neighborhood or wherever, and people would say, "So what do you do?" And I had to learn over time to gauge my audience, which is, I
Yeah.
think, a skill that we all have to develop. Who are we speaking to here?
Right.
And so eventually I added Reiki and the
Yeah.
Akashic records.
Oh, yes.
So, when I'm speaking to somebody that is a muggle, so to speak, um,
You
and they
have to,
ask,
yeah,
I'll say I'm a
you have to
holistic
tailor it.
healer.
Right.
And if they want to pursue it and they say, well, what does that mean? Then I'll say, well, I have an astrology Reiki practice.
Mhm.
And I've had some people say to me, oh, I totally believe in Reiki. I've had, great outcomes and results from Reiki session, but astrology, oh, you know, that's a little out there for me. And I'm like, yeah, this
What?
is all a continuum. It's
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
it's like, do you believe in microwaves, radio waves,
Right. It,
sonograms,
it's energy.
MRIs? It's
Right.
all energy.
Right. It is. It's so crazy. So did you have any sort of, well, I mean, you kind of just touched on that, but fears or reservations about sort of coming out like that? Because to your point, there's all these different audiences that you know are going to respond differently. And like, what did that feel like? That sort of, did it feel
When
scary,
I, yes,
liberating? Yeah.
yeah, when I was first, I mean, it's interesting. I haven't thought about this in a while. One of the teachers I was studying with, I remember reading charts with her, and she looked at me and she said, "So, have you come out with this yet?"
Right.
And I remember being like,
I know.
I'm gonna have to cross that bridge at some point. And
Right.
so, because I I had a supportive environment
Yeah.
immediately, I
Right.
felt it was like a very small risk. First, I'd float it with people in a more intimate setting and see what
Hmm.
their response was. And it was a lesson in learning that their response is more about them than it is about me.
Totally, totally. It's all that sort of releasing that attachment that we have to how people are going to respond, the external, right? The validation, all the things we're programmed to be thinking about every day, right? Is
Right.
how will I be perceived? Will I belong? Will I be misunderstood? When you can release that, I mean, that's part of what this whole movement is about, right? When you can release all of those fears around that, it's like, who cares? This isn't
It is
about,
so liberating.
right? And so empowering, and you really I don't know, you just feel more aligned
Right.
with, like you said, who you are, what you came here to do, and who you came here to be. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And so flash forward many years, I moved to the Berkshires about 4 years ago in Western Massachusetts. And I'm closer to my daughters and nature and all of those wonderful things, but I didn't know a lot of people here. And so as I'm introducing myself to people here, I really had to remark
Yeah.
and see what a journey it's been, because people would say, "So what do you do?" And I would come right out and say, "I'm an
Yeah.
astrologer." And the responses were hilarious. I mean,
Tell
some
us
were
some of the
like, "That's the,"
responses.
some of them were like, "That's the coolest thing,"
Yeah.
and then other people were like, "Oh,
Huh?
she's the fortune teller,"
Oh, the fortune teller. Yeah. Oh
I'm
my
like,
God. Oh, that's so funny. It's so funny. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm the neighborhood fortune teller, and
I
I
love
I
it.
get a kick out of it. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, if that's the way you can wrap your mind around what I do,
Right.
then, you know,
Right. Oh, I
so be
love
it.
it. So have you found, so this is interesting. So now you're sort of creating a new community, or you have been over the last 4 years, I think
Hmm.
you said.
Hmm. Hmm.
Have you found like this act of sort of being coming out and sharing your story has impacted your connections with other people, like in that community?
Um,
In,
yes, I would say most people in my neighborhood and in the Berkshire community, well, first of all, the Berkshires is very open-minded,
oh yeah,
generally speaking.
absolutely.
So if I was going to resettle somewhere, it's almost like a mini Sedona here.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except not
So
as warm. Very different temperature and climate.
very different temperature. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, although Sedona can get pretty cold in the middle of winter because it's
Yeah.
a high elevation. But to your point, yes, it's very different landscape. But those people that are not receptive to it are in the vast minority, I have
Right.
found. I mean,
Right.
the little local newspaper was thrilled. They have me writing an article, a column, monthly column in the
Very
newspaper.
cool.
So by and large, people have been very receptive.
That's great. I think you said it in one of our conversations. The healer's journey is not for the faint of heart. Boy, you can say that again. That's not why we do it, right?
No,
Yeah.
no. And one of my big reminders to people is it chooses you, you don't choose it.
Mm,
You really did
yeah.
co-create and co-sign
This
to do
contract.
this work.
Yeah.
And, but as you heal others, you're also healing yourself.
Say it, sister.
Yep.
I preach that, this idea of kind of sharing and setting yourself free. Of course, you're initially doing it for your own self-healing, but then you see the it as a catalyst for this compassion and empathy and community that just unfolds, and that, I mean, that's where the magic happens, right?
It really is.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
could not have
it's
said it better.
that's
Yeah.
why I do this work, and I just feel like it's changing the conversations. Well, first of all, it's allowing us to have the conversations that we wouldn't have had in the past, but it's also changing the tone of those conversations. And God knows we need more, you know, more kinder and more compassionate world right now. Yeah.
Yes, and I do find that the younger generations, like anything with children, I mean, not to
Yes.
call the millennials children, but they're,
Right. Yeah.
20, 30 years younger, and they're much more open-minded. I'd say the people, the cohort peer group from age 35
Yeah.
and younger is really, I mean, you see the explosion on
Absolutely.
Instagram and TikTok and,
They're much
you
more
know,
open. Yeah.
very open.
Well,
Yeah,
again, we're moving into that we're in the age of Aquarius.
we
Yes.
are. We
Right.
are.
So we're feeling, I think so much of what we're feeling right now, this shift that can be very unsettling, is also leading us to your point, to a better, more heart-centered place. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these young people are the people who are going to help us get there.
Right. And if
Yeah.
you really step back and think about it, they're incarnating more recently, and so
Right.
they're actually our elders.
Right.
It's the
The
reverse
cycle.
cycle.
Wow. That's
And
so
so
fascinating.
they're carrying the wisdom of the ancients just as we did too,
Right.
but they're incarnating saying, why, well, hello, why why what's the problem
Why
with
haven't you
this?
fixed this already?
Right,
Oh, it's
right.
so fascinating. Wow, we know we could talk for an hour and not be out of things to say, but I know I try to be respectful of the time that people have to listen to these podcasts. So, let me just ask you, Hillary, what would you say to somebody out there who's listening who might feel like they have a story that they would like to share and but are feeling a little bit fearful or apprehensive about it? What advice would you give to them?
I would say first sit with it,
Mm,
and I have what's called a yuck to yum. scale. It's very
Yes.
technical,
I
very,
like that.
and when you're not with your yum, when you're keeping your yum away from you, holding it at a distance, how do you feel?
Yeah.
And when you're in your yum, sitting in your yum, doing your yum, how do you feel?
So true.
And if your soul is really on fire, you will know. And it's like a new love, when you're first in love. And
Yeah.
if you step away from that, um, you miss it.
It's this whole idea of dropping out of our busy monkey minds into our hearts and allowing ourselves to feel what our bodies are trying to tell us. Yeah, that
Exactly.
it's so beautiful. Thank you. So, how can people get in touch with you? Because I know they're all going to want to book appointments with you for astrology readings, for Akashic record readings, and for energy work. So, how do they get in touch with you?
It's my website is hilaryharley.com. Hilary has one L, so it's
Yes.
Hilary, Harley, like the motorcycle,
I love it.
Harley. I am no relation to the motorcycle.
Love it. I love it. It's such a great name, by the way. It's like a stage name. Hilary Harley. I love it.
It
I
was my
want to
parents.
I know I want to express my deep gratitude to you for being here and showing up for yourself to share your story and honoring your own journey, and also for being willing to be vulnerable for our listeners. So
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much, Jen. It's an
Oh,
honor.
absolutely. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today as we continue to uncover really the courage that it takes to be seen in this way and the magic that happens when we do show up for ourselves honestly and unapologetically, which is what this is all about. So if you have a story to share and you would like to do so on this platform, please reach out to me at jen@jengulbrand.com. That's Jen with two N's, GULBRAND.com. Thank you again for being here today. I'm wishing you all a very joy filled day. Until next time.